reason I push you to that point is because now what we want to do is we want, how to prototype and influence people. We want to take that, oh, wouldn't it be cool if, and we want to move it towards, we're going to build something. And so I'm going to turn it over to you. Like, how do we get there? What's the in-between step look like?
Okay, so the creative lead of Firefox, we've done a lot of the prototyping along with the tool wherever it is around the project that came out of Mozilla Labs, like Ubiquity, Jetpack, which is our method of doing extension development by using only JavaScript and HTML, and Panorama. And throughout this process, prototyping has been incredibly important because prototyping is what lets you influence people. So this is sort of a talk in two parts. One is sort of the framework for how you think about prototyping and why you prototype. And the second part is going to be really fast writing something in front of you all, which is terribly boring, I'm sure, because watching somebody else code is sort of like trying to take out a contact lens with like a cotton ball. I don't know, but it sounds unpleasant, but we're going to try a little bit of it. So one of the things that I've discovered as I've been like at Mozilla is that the hardest part of software isn't software, right? It's culture and it's people. Because when you make software, writing it's easy. It's convincing people that that's the thing that you're going to build that's really hard. And so that's why it's talking about how to prototype and then to influence people. So in the open source world, we think about design, or at least I think about design very much in analogy. So if I wanted to convince a group of people to make something, well, I can't tell them to do it because it's open source, right? 40% of our code comes from people that I've never met, and that I cannot, under any circumstance, control. But this is really the same in any organization, is that you don't really control people, right? You inspire people. So if I wanted to build an open source railroad across the US, I'd have to do two things. One, I'd have to build the first 100 miles, show people how to get going, right? That's the prototype that I'm going to be talking about. And two, you build a resort town at the other end of the US. Right? Something really shiny that people say, I want to be there. And you're like, sure, you just have to build this railroad first. And is all the hard work in getting across the plains and over the mountains and past mosquitoes? Yes, that's all the hard work, but it's your job to inspire. So that gets me to my first thing. To design really is to inspire participation, which, now that I say that, it sounds awfully familiar to what everyone says teaching is. And then, this is the other thing, and this is sort of as a creator, it takes a long time for me to grapple with this, is that the value of an idea is zero. It's something that comes out of Silicon Valley. If I have an idea, fantastic. But it doesn't change the world in any way, right? So the value of the idea is zero unless it can be communicated. And that's either as a piece of software or via an essay or some other way of getting somebody else to be inspired to participate. So how do you do that? Well, let's step back for a second and say, when people are talking about products and demos, and they're saying like, this is what it does, unfortunately, the way it gets demoed is often like this. And this comes out of a book called Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. And it's a boy up in front of his class saying like, here's my show and tell thing. And he does it by saying, well, this is my robot. And the teacher says, well, what does your robot do? What is this thing? And he says, well, I like it because it flips over and then it has one of these things. And then the head flips back and then I get it wrong. And oh wait, no, now it's an airplane, right? And that's it. And that's how most software feels, is that it's a set of disjoint things that don't make sense as a story. So when you demo a product, you want it to be much more like this. This is well worth reading.
Somebody read that out now?
Sure. So he says, Dad, I don't have anything for show and tell today. And the father says, I've just got the thing for you. And the teacher says, who wants to show and tell next? And this is going to be interesting. And so the father says, or the son says, these are my dad's sticks. And he says, don't be shy, everyone come and touch them. And everyone comes and starts touching them and says, wow, these are amazing. And then they share a happy moment together. Right? You want your product to be touchable and feelable. You want your demos and ideas to have this sort of visceral feedback. And tits. And tits, of course. Right, so some crazy ideas, everything from the Firefox Mobile, Firefox Mobile to Ubiquity and Passbox to Jetpack, the new tab experience and Panorama tab candy all come out of these demos, which are touchable and feelable. And why do I talk about it this way? It's because when you want to communicate an idea, you have to think about the bandwidth that an idea is communicated about. So generally this starts as you have your idea, but that has very low bandwidth of communication because my idea is very different than your idea when I say a sentence. Then you write that idea up in sort of an email form. And again, people aren't generally excited by this. You have your amazing idea, you get up at 3 in the morning, you write it out, you send it off, and you don't get any response. This has happened to all of us because that brilliant thought there just doesn't get transmitted in write-ups. And so then you start mocking things up. You do pictures, and people slowly get excited. And by the time you get to a prototype or a video, which is even better, as I think you were saying, video has amazing expressive ability because you control the narrative. That's when you can start communicating, getting people excited. So, for how many of you have seen Firefox Panorama? Okay. So some of you. For the other ones, it's a very graphical way of zooming in and out of your tabs and organizing them. And this started out as a very simple idea: manage your tabs spatially. And I proposed this in a number of our meetings, and it universally just got ignored. So I was like, all right, that's fine. So I wrote up that late night email, and once again, it got ignored. So then I started doing mock-ups. And these were cool, but once again, it got ignored. And then I got to here. So this doesn't look at all like Panorama does now, but it was the very first thing that started getting people's attention. And while you can't really hear it, it was just me walking through this thing and saying like, hey, look, there are a number of tabs here. You can put them in groups, and there we go. You can drag them around, right? This is the first time that for people, it started to make sense. The idea that was in my head could now be in other people's heads. And more importantly, that idea became their own. And they started coming to me and saying, wouldn't this be cool if? And then we said, yes, that would be cool. And we started incorporating it, right? So it was this place that was useful in influencing people. And notice it looks really, really ugly. It just has some of the very basic functionalities in there. So what is the goal of prototyping? What is the thing that you all are going to be making tomorrow? That was really slow. It's to convince yourselves and others of an idea. Why do I bring this up now? It's because this is going to tell you what you don't have to do, right? Because the most important thing in prototyping is getting just a sketch of an idea. So always measure against the metric of is it convincing, not does it do everything. So here are the principles of prototyping, the ones that I always try to follow. 0 or 1, depending on whether you're a programmer or not. No matter how good you are, there is no substitute for trying it. You are wrong. So I've been designing for a number of years. I have all sorts of embarrassing things when people introduce me, and I still know that when I design something the first time, I'm going to be wrong. And I plan for it. I plan that I don't even know what I'm trying to solve yet. And so you just have to build that in. Don't assume you're going to get it right the first time. Number 1 or 2, and this one is actually incredibly, incredibly important, is aim to finish the first pass in a day, which is great that you're going to be doing it tomorrow. So oftentimes what I hear is people say, I have this great idea, and I tell them to prototype, they're like, no, that's going to take too long. And there's this barrier to entry where they have to sit down and do it, but they don't because they think it's going to take them too long. Or 2, they'll start something and they won't get to the thing they really want to do. They'll end up making an infrastructure or a back-end piece that they think they're going to need, some sort of framework. And so it takes them a week before they actually start making the interesting bit. So when I prototype something, either in labs or when I get other people to prototype it, we make sure to finish the first pass in a day, something we can download to somebody else, because that makes you take all the right shortcuts and makes you focus on the most important thing, right? And it's a forcing function. So this cannot be overstated. Some examples of this. This, as most people can see, is a block of wood. But it's not. It's way more than that. This is actually a Wii controller, right? So people at Nintendo, when they were prototyping this in the early days of the magical Wii controller, they actually had blocks of wood. And they played with different shapes of blocks of wood. And they just swung it around in the air, right? So something as complicated as a 3D remote control sensing thing, which took the game world by storm, they were able to prototype in a day with a block of wood. Now, interestingly enough, this block of wood has rather a history, because this is also the Palm Pilot. And the guy that started Palm actually got a piece of wood, a couple different types until he got the right shape and size, and he carried it around with him for months. And he'd pretend to use it. He's like, well, when would I use this? Is it socially acceptable for me to sit here and take it out and do the BlackBerry prayer underneath the table? Like, what kinds of things I'm going to write on, right? And he tried this, and this is how they got to a number of their canonical use cases, and why Palm Pilot actually worked out of the gate, because he had prototyped it. Again, this is a really complex piece of software and hardware, but it's all could be prototyped in one day. So as you think about the things you're going to be prototyping, it's going to seem big and complicated, but the most important and fundamental aspects of it can be simplified down to a block of wood, or the equivalent. The last thing about finishing in a day is that you will also definitely hit roadblocks. You'll hit walls, and you just have to learn to not grapple with them too long. You just try something else. Just go around it, right? Just do not get stuck. That's why we have to do it in a day. So aim to finish the first pass in a day. Do less, and if you hit a wall, try another track. Number 2 or 3. You're making a touchable sketch, and the most important thing about sketches is that you don't color in every line. If you do, it actually ruins the sketch. So when you're creating a prototype, don't do everything, right? Choose the big things that give you the overall sense. You don't have to make everything. Similarly, the interfaces, the products, which means you can take all sorts of shortcuts to get around the edges, to just give people the sense of what this thing is, even if there's no back end there, right? Even just an image comes up when you click on the edit button. And so we actually, when we were doing Panorama, we were playing around with a lot of these sorts of interfaces of how things are going to stack, and you'll notice that if you you could drag things from the wrong place. Let's see if it actually does it. Yeah, there we go. You could drag them from all over the place, and we just didn't care, right? Because it's a prototype. It's not real. And it got things across. So it made it much simpler to get to something that we could try. And don't be afraid to say that something is under construction. This is actually from GeoCities. As everyone remembers, this beautiful, like, giant banner ad is like under construction. There's actually a website which categorizes all of them. You can just find every single GeoCities under construction sign. It's awesome, and like your eyes bleed, but it's cool. So don't be afraid to say when somebody clicks on something, under construction right now, come back. Because people will want to try something, say a save button, right? But you haven't implemented save. Instead of not having save in there, and so everyone will ask you like, oh, are you gonna have a save? You just put save there, but it says coming soon. And that's a really effective method for getting people to understand where you're going without having to implement all the hard parts. Right. Lovely. So actually this is an image site, right? This is not real. You can always show stuff in your interface without actually implementing anything by just having an image sitting there. My favorite example of this was when I was giving a keynote at the Future of Web Apps, and the person in front of me had the most amazing demo of editing stuff online, going back and forth, and it was just substantial. I know I felt really bad I had to go after him. And later, we were having drinks, and it was like, that was an amazing demo. It was like, well, the thing was, is like 30% of it, like all the hard parts, was just images. If I typed anything else, it would have broken. But it didn't matter, right? It got the idea across, and it made people super excited and willing to commit. So image sites are good. Number 3, whenever you're making a prototype, a tight feedback loop is super key. This is why I love working on the web. You have to keep trying it and trying it and trying it. And any way that you can start getting the simplest functionality to where you're using it yourself, your dog fooding, is necessary. Again, it's because you don't know the problem you're trying to solve. You're going to get it wrong. So if you're using it, you'll be your own worst enemy, but also your own best friend. Number 4 is that you're iterating your solution as well as the understanding of the problem. And most people actually forget this about design, is that when you sit down to design a problem, generally, you don't know what that problem is. So mathematics, for me, is a great case in point where if you ask the question in the right way, the solution would be obvious. And so most of solving a math problem is just rethinking about asking the problem the right way, getting into the right terms. So I'm a geek, clearly. And when I was younger, I was in particular a paper airplane geek. I loved paper airplanes more than almost anything, including dinner, which my mom disliked, but that's okay. So I wanted to make the very best paper airplane. And so I set out to design when I was like in 4th or 5th grade to make the very best paper airplane. And so this was it. This is sort of the standard dart. But I realized it wasn't just going fastest or furthest that I was interested in. I wanted to make a paper airplane that glides well. I wanted it to stay up for a long time, right? So I changed my design problem, or design statement to say make a plane that glides well. And I came up with this plane. And this one actually, you sort of launch it here and it goes, and it has a beautiful, beautiful glide. The best that you can probably get, given that it's long and thin. But I realized that wasn't really the problem I was trying to solve. That wasn't making me happy. I wanted to make a pure paper plane that glides well and can be thrown. I wanted to throw it up, right, to go really for a long time. And I didn't want to add, I felt like it was cheating to add paper, or to add like a paper clip or tape or staples. That wasn't paper plane anymore, right? I wanted to be a purist. So after doing that, I came up with this design. Actually, this design is a well-known, any grade schooler sort of knows this design, and it flies well. I was happy there for a while, but I realized it wasn't quite right yet. There's still something wrong. When you throw something, you really want its weight to be up and near the front because that gets the best trajectory. That means you generally have the best glide and more wingspan. So I changed the design problem yet again. Make a pure paper plane that glides well, can be launched, and has most of its weight up front. Given that design specification, it was pretty easy to come up with a new paper airplane that performed even better. But there's yet another problem, and that is when you throw a paper airplane, see, I told you I'm a geek. When you throw a paper airplane, the fuselage starts like this, and then it flattens out under the weight of being thrown. And so as the final step, I said I wanted to solve that problem. And so indeed I did, and I came up with this paper airplane that's all bound together, and it actually flies fantastically. And finally, this was the paper airplane that I always dreamed of, right? And it won lots of my 5th grade competitions at school. And I was still the least popular kid in the class. So if I had given you that original problem statement of make the best paper plane to everyone in this room, you would all come up with very different paper airplanes because it's not a well-defined problem. If I told you all to make a pure paper plane that glides well, can be launched, has most of its weight up front, and has a non-floppy fuselage, you are all going to come up with a paper airplane that looks pretty similar to the one that I came up with. Right? It'll have lots of differences, but it'll be solving the same problem. That's what I mean by you're iterating this problem statement at the same time as you're iterating your solution. So as you guys are prototyping tomorrow, keep thinking back to like, are we really solving the right problem? And if you're starting to get lots of undefined, or you don't know how to choose one solution over another solution, that probably means you don't know what your problem is. Number 5, very simple, just treat the code as throwaway, but be ready to refactor. So don't worry about great documentation or other coding standards when you're prototyping. I've had to throw away lots of code, and Jetpack, I think, went through 3 different iterations. We threw everything away. Whereas Panorama, we actually didn't have to throw anything away. We just kept reiterating. So that's this statement's there. And the last one, I get this fairly often as a question is, but I can't make beautiful things, right? And there's one very, very simple solution to this, and that is feel free to steal it, right? This is a prototype. It's not something you're necessarily publishing out to the world, so by all means be heavily inspired. I think it was Steve Jobs, he's actually quoting somebody else when he said this, but I don't remember who that was, that a good artist creates and a great artist steals, right?
Picasso.
Picasso, thank you, yes.
Barcelona.
I should go hide under the table now. So the tools that I often use are jQuery and HTML and CSS, and I'm going to demonstrate this just a little bit, but I highly recommend this site for people that aren't deep dark coders but just want to do something simple. It's just jQueryfordesigners.com. So, you know, standard, say what you're going to say it, and repeat. Things to keep in mind when you're prototyping are you're going to get it wrong the first time, try to finish the first artifact in a day, iterate fast, use it all the time, you will change the problem you're trying to solve, don't worry about best practices because you're going to throw it away, and steal any visual design that you like to make it look beautiful. Because unfortunately, looking beautiful actually affects the way people think about your product. Right? And this is more for the software engineers in here. Reach for a lightweight prototype first. Don't dive directly into your deep, dark C, C++ world. Just do whatever it takes to make it work right. We already said that. So then when you have your prototype, what do you do? Well, you're trying to sell the dream, right? You become a pitch person or a salesman. So this is an awesome, like, standalone vehicle which is all socially and environmentally non-impactful. But it turns out, that's not really the way to sell it, right? When you pitch your audience, when you tell somebody about what you're making, you have to answer the question, how does it make their life better? Not just go through your toy and show all the little bits, right? You have to show the tits, as it were. So you have to sell the dream. This is not the way to sell it. This is the way to sell your dream. Apparently, their demographic was the kind of guy that liked hair metal and rocked out in silver pants, or gold pants in the middle of a field. Oddly enough, this is a real example from an architectural firm that published these things out, and I guess that's who they thought was environmentally friendly. And you want to tell a story, right? You have to put your demonstration and your prototype into a larger framework where people understand why they should care. And feel free to be highly dramatic, right? You can really yam it up. Like, it's okay to be a salesperson in this one case. So I want to lead you through quickly. Let's see how fast I've gone through this. Pretty fast, wow. Quickly through the creation process to show how sort of like jazzy you can actually get very, very quickly. So this part, hopefully, we like pair programming, but with like 100 people, so we don't know that it will work. But how do you do this? So I want to make a very simple thing, which streams Twitter stuff from Drumbeat. Or from anything, right? So it's a fairly simple application. So you start with sort of wireframe. And this one you can do something normal, right? So there's a search box up at the top, and then the stream goes down at the bottom. That seems really boring. I want something a little bit more pizzazzy. So when I was mocking this up, I was like, well, how about if you just start with a simple page that has search here, you type, and then you get the Twitter statuses to appear sort of in random piles, and then you zoom into each one, right? Let's just imagine that we can do that. I'm like, all right, that seems good. That's enough to go on. I actually have more detailed stuff in my bag. And so I got to work with that. Oops. Let me switch out of this, make this go away. So that's not totally boring. I actually started with just a little bit of code here, which I'll also jump into. But I want to show you how easy it is to steal other people's work and build on top of it. So there's a wonderful library called Zoomaz, this here, that works on top of jQuery. And what it does is just lets you zoom around in a page. If you click on it, it goes in and out, using all standard HTML technology. And it's very simple. You just have to include a couple lines of code at the top, and then you use one line of code zoom to, right? So given this, I'm like, aha, I think I can make this zooming thing where you, like, each Twitter stream comes in pretty easily. So we come back here. So let's look at this page. Right now it doesn't do much. Let's see what it is. So right now it's one very short page. Can people roughly see this? Oh, fantastic. All right. I'm including jQuery and the Zoomaz stuff. I have that first box I showed you about. So div with an ID of orange or original. I just have my text. I have an input box, and then I have a button which says stream it. And that's all, right? I have a little bit of CSS here to make the box appear in the upper right-hand corner with a little bit of box shadowing. I have this thing called status, which will soon be the thing where status appears. And then I have the go button. And I have exactly one function in here for now. And this shows the status. So it creates a random size. It makes a new div element. It positions it randomly inside the window. gives it a random width, and changes the font size. It appends some status into that thing and puts that into the body. So if I'm in here, I hit Command-Shift-K, which brings up the console. I can now type, right, this is show status. It's a function, so I type show status, and then text is hello. It'll appear someplace in there. Right, so that's all I have right now, just sort of very basic framework. All right, so that's sort of cool, but a little bit boring. So first I want to do is have this box zoom in. Right, so we're going to do the simplest thing. I already showed you that you just use the zoom to function. So I'm just going to call orange, so that's this div. I'm just going to say when you start, zoom here. So when I run this, we now get something sort of cool. Right? So it's pretty fast to get to something interesting. Well, now we actually have to make this do something. So if I type drumbeat in here and hit stream, nothing's going to happen. Actually, first, before we do that, I'm going to uncomment that out. Let's have a little more fun inside creating the statuses. Let's give it a color, so background color. And then we're going to say a particular type of value for the color. Watch me make mistakes here. Okay, so now we have math.random. We need something in 360-degree space. We want it with 50% saturation and 100% lightness and 0.8% background color. All right, so if this works, what you should see, oops, go away, is status, display status. What do I call this thing? Show status. Text, hello. Oh no, it looks like I made a mistake. Error in parsing value background color. HSVL. Yeah, whatever. It'll take too long. Let's do something else. Let's do. What? Did I hear it wrong?
You've got to. Oh no.
Nah, it looks sort of right to me. I don't know why that's not working.
It's HSL.
What? HSL? Intriguing.
It's the 100% luminosity. It's too much.
Okay. See? Group debugging. Check it out. Woot. Well done, sir. I owe you a beer. All right. So now we have lots of these things, all different colors. So that's nice. Now let's also change the rotation. So Moz transform. Let's just rotate it around. Rotate. And then we need in degrees, so math.random times 180, so 180 degrees rotation. Let's do this again. Woot. Now they're just showing off at pretty random stuff. Nice. Now that we've got something sort of interesting going on, all we have to do is hook this up to Twitter. So we come over here to the Twitter page, we look at their search method, and you can see here that all you have to do is get a to call a simple URL with a callback and the query, and that'll put it in. So to make this a little bit easier, I'm just going to copy this from the other file, and I'll explain what it is. Yeah, I'm cheating. But I don't have to. Right. Okay. So now when you click on go, it's going to clicking on go. It's going to get this URL, which is going to call a function called result with the value of the text field here, and then put that script tag into the page. Right. So that means we're also going to have a function called results, which is going to get the results. So let's do the old standby. Make sure this is actually working. Refresh the page. When I click stream, error loading script. I'm not on the interwebs. Uh-oh. Oh, wait. Drumbeat. See if this works. Let me just go to Google. Make sure that.
Try the third one. Before.
Nothing's working.
Or have the Hendrik one?
Yeah, Pablo,
Yeah,
three words.
Hendrik's working.
Which one?
Prepare.
And can we test it by looking at what is the result of that URL directly in the browser?
Yes, unfortunately, it's normally with, it's JSON encoded. So which one did you say, this one? Go, please. Oh, more beer into your computer. All right, so then we see that it's connecting to Twitter. Search the twitter.com. It worked. You see this useless object here. So then we're going to do two things here. I'm just going to again steal this a little bit. We want to take the results and store it into a global object, because remember, global objects are okay because this is a prototype. And also an index. And then I say I want to display something. So let's write this display function. Display next. And it's going to do two things. It's going to, let me go back to make sure I'm thinking about this right. Yeah. So we're going to do, first we want to show the status. In this case, we want the window.results. And then we want some index, so window.theIndex. So this just gets the very first search result. And it passes it into show status, which has a .text, which gets shown here. So now if we come back to this page, search, and load it up, we get, well, you can sort of see it down there. You can see one thing showing up. So that's cool. Then we say set timeout. And then we actually would have to say window.theIndex ++. And after 4,000 seconds, we should call it again.
Milliseconds.
What? Oh, it's 4,000 milliseconds, thank you. You just display next. So that's all we have to do here. The last thing, of course, is that when we actually append it, we want to add a zoom to functionality. And of course, at the beginning, let's see if this zoom to. So if this all worked correctly, it'll zoom in. And now I hit stream, we will have this thing, or, yep. We now actually have a pretty cool, usable Twitter streaming device, which I have almost entirely hand-coded in front of you. And so that's sort of the power of JavaScript and HTML, is that given other people's libraries, and whatever you're trying to do, there's probably somebody else who's written something which makes it all work. You can get to something which feels real and feels actually pretty sexy within, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, depending on what you're doing. Yeah, now I can't compete with this thing, can I?
Refresh.
Yeah, refresh. Okay. So I don't know if anybody wants to play with this more, but that's sort of the power of prototyping. It goes from, I want a Twitter streamy thingy bobber that zooms around to, no, here it is, it's cool, play with it. Of course, I can't share this, I can't do a number of things, but that's okay, that's enough to get people excited. And I think that means that this is the end, because that is how to prototype. And
So it's a good session when we can't even get in the room. Like we got pushed out the back door, so that's great. So really appreciate you coming and doing that. I think you didn't get that for free, because now you guys have to do, like, we're going to do this tomorrow. That's our goal, is to, to take that, to get that block of wood, really, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully have it work on the web. So do you have questions for him that are applicable to you actually putting into practice some of what you heard here?
Can we get popcorn to trigger Twitter updates like that on a timeline?
yes.
Yeah. Cool.
Done.
Done. More questions like that.
How do you manage to convince people that they shouldn't expect it to go into production a day from after you've showed them the prototype? Yeah. Ah.
So in some ways, that's an incredibly classy problem to have, right? Because if you're that far, they want it. Yeah, so That's harder. So a lot of what you then have to do is manage expectations, right? And a standard process of saying, to get these things to be production quality will take this amount of time. And these things to get production quality take this amount of time. But normally, if you get them really excited, you can figure out some way of launching a smaller part of it that's dog foodable fairly quickly to a small group of people. So you can say, hey, actually, instead of launching it right now, we're going to do a beta program to actually test it and make sure that this thing is right. And that's more manageable because you can have a lot more bugs in that small area. So it's a combination of trying to do agile programming mixed with expectation setting that, like, my demo won't work for other languages or has XSS vulnerabilities in it, all that kind of stuff. Other questions?
What did he say that surprised you? I mean, was it all stuff you knew? Is it different?
Well, I wanted to resonate on this idea of like making it look good and making people believe it if it's not finished. And there was this video that was circulated. There's a lot of videos that come out like this, but there was a video on Vimeo maybe last year or a couple years ago, that David O'Reilly, the animator, made, which sort of did this fake y-axis rotation on the iPhone and created kind of a fake hologram, and everybody thought it was real. And it's still, like I saw him the other day, he said it's still getting comments, it's still like provoking questions and sparking dialogue, and I'm a real true believer in the power of aesthetics to manifest action. So I think in the design process, like, you can also go to this crazy level where you just imagine, you just visualize, and then other people build it because they're inspired by what you've imagined.
So on that level, let me teach you all like one little trick that'll make everything you do look much, much better. And that is, it's essentially 2 lines of CSS. So let me right now remove this thing.
I have a feeling that this is going to be.
All right, so let's get rid of these 2. We come back, and you can see this now looks like a gross borderless thing. And let me actually move it down just a little bit. Padding top pixels. Pixels, and by padding, I really meant margin. Okay, so now you can see just how gross this thing looks. Also always use Webpack, it's gorgeous. So then you do one thing. So you add a slight rounded radius. So now it'll look like this. Slightly better, but still sort of gross. Then you do one other thing. And this is you add 2 box shadows. One is white, and if you want it to stand out, you have the white go down 1 pixel. So this says no blurring. 1 pixel down on the y-axis, no pixels on x or y. And 2, add a black border. So RGBA, so 0, 0, 0, so that's black. 0.5 is sort of a grayish, up 1 pixel. Right? So when I do that, all of a sudden you get this sort of standard, like pretty, now it's like, it's sort of hard to see here, but slightly embeveled look that goes on all Apple things. So you can do this with text, you can do this with anything, all of a sudden it gets that like, pretty Apple-y look. And it's very simple to make it then go in, where you have it 1, -1, and there we go, now it's inside into the page. So just this one trick, you just apply it everywhere, it makes everything look so much nicer.
And if that, so there's a lot of people who aren't coders, and if that didn't seem easy to you, there are people who've built web tools that allow you to like make CSS borders, do drop shadows, and so on without, knowing -1 this, 0 here, RGB. So, you can, if you Google, like for some of these, you'll find ready-made tools for generating some of that stuff.
Yep.
Other questions? No? Okay, well, I just want to say thanks very much. I think that was very engaging. Obviously, like literally pushed us right out the back of our door. So that's good. So thanks very much.
And feel free to hit me up. I'll be wandering around, or you can email me or find me on Twitter. I'm at Aza. That's pretty easy.
And the invitation, if you want to stick around for the next session, is open.
So we're going to take a little break just so you can